welcome to Women's Cricket Chat. I'm Hannah.
And I'm Alexandra, Alex for short. Coming up on today's podcast, we've got rising journalist Radha Gupta. Now, Radha is already making serious waves in sports journalism and in women's sport and women's cricket at just 20 years old. Having seen that there was a lack of coverage of women's sport and women's cricket, it inspired her to set up her own platform, SheTalksBall. Here, Radha talks to us about her journey so far.
So, first of all, if you just want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about everything you're up to at the moment.
Right. My name is Radha. I'm a 20-year-old student from India, and I grew up in Mumbai. So I've had that big city experience, and I grew up playing whatever sport I could. I would just go down and catch the boys who were playing and say, like, I'm going to play with you. And I got into cricket. It's big in India. I mean, it's hard to miss it. And football was another sort of big sport that I took up, especially as school offered it. So that was really big for me. And basically, I wouldn't study too much. I would just play all the time. And I played cricket in my colony or in my society with a leather ball, with pads. I had everything. And I was pretty good, even if I may say so myself, but there was really no pathway that I could see, getting to a higher level. I don't see that there's any sort of grassroots development of women's cricket in India too much. So I steered away to football. I represented my school, my district, things like that. And yeah, things just went on, and I found myself in college playing for my college team. We had an intra-college cricket game, so I took part in that. I made the most runs, got some prize money and all. I was pretty happy, but I've had this sort of intervention in the last 9 or 10 months when it was a silver lining of staying at home. I realized that there's no women's sport on TV. And I just wondered that what's happening there. Like I've played it, I've seen my friends play it, but I don't see anyone above me who plays it. And it just blew my mind that I'd grown up just watching men and just watching their sports and their teams. And I realized that there is this space, and I think, you both have realized it as well. And that's how we sort of connected, that there is this space that needs to be explored, that needs to be developed, that is women in sports, enhancing it, covering it more. And yeah, I really started just volunteering with organizations, like a freak incident. And I started volunteering with a few organizations. And yeah, eventually, December rolled around and I got offered a freelance job with WomensCricZone, which is sort of an established women's sporting platform globally now, I would say. So that was really cool. And I have my semester break going on, so I've been working on that. But once my semester kicks off, I'll still continue to do that because it's something that I really enjoy doing, and hopefully plan to do something similar in the future too.
I think we're quite similar in that respect, because for me, so I grew up playing cricket and everything. I got to kind of the 17, 18 year kind of bracket. And if we didn't kind of have the structures back then either, like here in England and stuff, like if you didn't go off to university, to like an MCC university, you would end up kind of like not really playing much because the club scene was dying out, to be fair. Like a real lack of opportunity. So I did exactly the same. I just focused on playing football and having fun. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about like not having those kind of opportunities. How did it make you feel at that kind of age?
Yeah, I tell this to everyone. I was heartbroken. Like I was completely crushed, especially because I was 16 years old and India had reached the ODI World Cup final and we were playing versus England at Lords. And I was like, wait, we can do this. Like this is something that India can do. They haven't done it ever. So, and that was sort of the phase where I peaked playing cricket with my, friends, and even in school I would play a bit. But I just told my parents, I just want to do this. I'll find a training facility, I'll find a coach, I'll do this, I'll do that. But I just want to do this. Just look at these women. I want to be like them. And they said, like, we want to support you. They've always supported me, but it was just that they couldn't see any pathway. I really couldn't see any pathway. And I was wondering that, fair enough. Like they say that, will it be financially stable? I said, I have no idea. They said they have no idea either. And I didn't know anyone who I could even ask if this was a pathway, right? Because I'd never seen any advertisements. I'd never seen any sort of brochures, any academies in my town. And I was completely crushed. And in fact, I went to my coach in school, the boys cricket team coach, and I said, do you have any sort of contact of an academy coach or someone I can go to? And he said, wait, you want to play? And I said, yeah, I want to play. And he said, I really don't know, I told him about the World Cup and how I got my family to watch the game and everything. And he said, like, yeah, I get where you're coming from. And I used to play like with him a bit in school. And he said, I really don't know. I don't know of any women's academy, even with a male coach, even with a female coach, I just don't know. And I said, yeah, even I don't know. And if he didn't know, then there was no way of me knowing. And that's like a phase that I was really crushed. But I said that there is some energy or some sort of passion within me that I can convert into, if not playing, sort of covering the game in a way that the next generation then doesn't have to face that sort of heartbreak, and they do see a pathway early on enough.
I can really relate to that because growing up Asian in England, you always get stigmatized in a sense that you have to be a doctor, you have to be an accountant, you have to go down all these routes. So I'm quite lucky in the fact that, like your family, my family are also quite supportive, because I know sometimes with certain people and certain ethnicities it is really difficult to break away from that trend. So how have you found it going into the world of sports journalism and in specific cricket journalism?
Yeah, it's very interesting because I'm still very new to the space, and anyone who I've encountered have really been inclusive, or they kind of already have this open mindset where if you know about cricket, that's enough. And so I'm lucky to have sort of started off with a good bunch of people around me, above me, like guiding me. And I think volunteering initially during my college semester really helped me out, because I was able to figure out what I was good at, what I didn't know how to do really. And I had people who could sort of train me a little bit. And I think that sort of navigating this thing comes with people around you. It's hard to do alone. And I was really sort of fortunate to be able to, and I think, again, that volunteering, that entire system comes with just cold emailing or like pushing yourself, selling yourself, saying that, hey, I want to do this. I know about this. Here's something I've written in the past, things like that. And just once you get in, then it's like, you use that to kind of make yourself more credible as the months go on. And, you're right. I mean, if you face that in England, you can imagine in India, every sort of student has this sort of pressure on them that you should pursue science, the standard things. And I'm glad that I was able to sort of break away, and my parents supported me. And they don't, again, like, they have no idea really what's going on or what I'm doing, recording all these podcasts, but they're happy and they enjoy it. They listen to it. And they say that, one day you're going to become this famous journalist in the world of sports. And I'm like, just wait, it's nothing's happened yet. But they're really excited to see that there is this possibility outside of just the conventional professions that Indians are encouraged to do or Asians are encouraged to do. So I think it comes with a good support system, be your family, be it the sort of connections that you choose to be around, your friends, and ultimately your mentors too.
100%, because you tweeted yesterday as well to me about my mum and stuff, because I'd made that comment on our introductory kind of podcast, like my mum hasn't got a clue what's going on. I did get in a little bit of trouble about that. But at the same time, I find it quite hard to kind of tell my mum what I'm doing and stuff, because like this world is so different to the kind of the world I grew up in, and like I'm the only person in my family to have left like my small village and all that kind of stuff, so I find it quite hard to relate. But then without my mum, she used to like drive me across the country playing cricket. She used to play herself, and well, she still does from time to time, like if we're short in the club kind of scene, she drove like 3 hours up to just play a game of kind of club cricket. So how important are female role models for you?
Yeah, it's extremely important. And I found that even a female role model not being involved in sports has helped me out, because a female, breaking barriers in any career is already sort of an achievement, because the men have had a head start. And in that sense, be it my mother, be it my teachers in school, I think they've been really, or even in college, they've been really influential in my life, because I've seen that you can do something just bigger than what your label is. If you're a teacher, you just don't have to be a teacher. You can be a friend, you can be a mentor, and just, things like that. I think it's very, very important. And that's why the one thing that keeps going on in my mind is, if we just create more conversation, or if we just create more content, instantly people see that there are, 3 women talking about cricket, and that's awesome. And that's already something new. And the second you do that, they start talking about cricket too, and it just builds from there. And it's just these small things that we can continue doing. And I think women are just become role models without doing too much, because you're already new in that space. So the fact that you are in that space and the fact that you're thriving there is already something to really sort of look up to. And I think anyone who's sort of listening to this, whatever you're doing, just continue doing it, because you are already breaking barriers in that sort of field. And I think, even if you didn't have one or you didn't have a female role model, you could become one very quickly, and you could have a really big impact on, anyone's life, really.
So is that what you want to achieve with your platform that you've got, that you want to keep it growing and keep it evolving and getting more people talking about women's cricket?
I think that's why I started, because I started volunteering for a lot of organizations, and I started doing so much work, and I realized that I'm sort of scattered in the sense that people are not really sure what I'm up to. So initially it was sort of designed, it's called SheTalksBall, and it was designed as a platform where I could sort of just store whatever I'm doing so people know that this is what's up. But then I realized that women in sports is more than just the athletes. It's like everyone who's doing things behind the scenes. And it's important to pave a pathway to a journalism sort of role, or to a management role, or an entrepreneurial role, business women. I mean, it's just packed with different professions within the same industry. So now my priority is to expose people who are sort of following the platform to women in sports, athletes and otherwise, because people behind the scenes also sort of enhance and push the game as much as the ones who are on camera or on field. So it's sort of now directed to be a place where a pathway can be shown. And that's why I'm trying to sort of talk to people who are doing unconventional things, and not just athletes, but are owners or are entrepreneurs or maybe sports agents, and how you sort of can get into that field and what it takes to kind of reach there, because that's how sort of exposure of the entire industry will grow.
And that's exactly why we wanted to get you on like the podcast in relatively early too. So we've only recorded a few episodes so far, and we were like, we need to get you on because your energy, your passion is exactly what we're trying to achieve too. But you are only kind of like 20. So how does that kind of feel being still quite young with an exciting like future ahead? Do you feel kind of under pressure, or are you just thriving on it at the moment?
I think I'm thriving on it at the moment, especially because I'll tell you this funny sort of anecdote where I think at the beginning of December, WomensCricZone had reached out to me because I had volunteered with another organization and interviewed one of their editors. And I was really excited to interview her, obviously. And my sort of interview style was such that since I knew about the game, I didn't want to just be question and answer. It was more like I would ask her and she would give her input and I'd say, yeah, I agree with you, and sort of add on to it. So she sort of liked my style of sort of conversing or whatever. And then she reached out to me saying, do you want to do this freelance role type of thing? And I said, yeah, sure. And then she started laughing and I was like, yeah, okay, what's happening? And she and the founder were on the call with me and they said, we were actually going to give you like a full-time role. And then we went to LinkedIn and saw you're 20 years old and you just come out of school. And so I was like kind of blushing on the call or whatever. But I think I realized that I do have sort of a knack for creating content when it comes to video content or presenting or things like that. So my parents were like sort of blown away with this because they keep wondering that is like a woman in sport going to be financially stable? It's always a question that comes up. And it was exciting to see that they were also excited about this. So as of now, I'm thriving on it because I have really no expectations. I'm still studying full time. So I do this sort of just behind the scenes, once my books are closed and once the Zoom calls end, I'm sort of doing this. And I think I'm lucky in the sense that I have these 1.5 years of college life to sort of experiment with whatever works, what doesn't work. And once I sort of have my degree at the end of 2022, I think I'll be able to sort of figure out what I want to maybe study more or get into some sort of work related thing.
And then just thinking about your kind of degree and everything, can you tell us a little bit about what you are studying and where you're studying?
So I'm studying at Ashoka University in India, and I'm studying for a Bachelor of Science in Psychology, along with a minor in entrepreneurship. So this is like an interesting combination that few sort of colleges offer in India. And what I sort of take away, so I studied science in school, like as expected. Till 12th, I did PCM and economics. And I was like, this is just not working out. I don't really enjoy this. I managed to like write my exams and everything, but I said I want to try something different. So I started off with psychology and entrepreneurship, and I just have to say I love it. And like my parents can see I love it too, because I end up scoring pretty well in it because it just comes naturally. And I think psychology and entrepreneurship are two things where you don't sort of narrow your thought process too early. In the sense, if you study, I don't know, like maybe chemistry or something, you end up just going too focused into one sort of space, where psychology can teach you about consumer analytics and entrepreneurship teaches you how to start businesses or how to run businesses, like, how to deal with the government when you are having a startup of your own. And I think those sort of things are a great platform for me to then maybe get into anything I want. It could be sports journalism, it could be something completely different. But I think that platform sort of provides me with the opportunity to know enough and build on that depending on where I want to go. So that's what I'm studying, and I'm really enjoying it. I get to play, obviously, when we were on campus, we'd play football with my college team for 2 hours every evening. So that was great. That's probably what I miss the most from campus. As of now, everything's online, but the silver lining again has been that I've been able to sort of pursue my passion outside of studying too.
You were talking a little bit about how the education system is in India. Like in England, for instance, we have degrees where you can go and do sports journalism, or you can do broadcast journalism, which is what I did. So I was just wondering, is there any clear pathways in India to do journalism, or is it you do your psychology degree and then maybe do a master's?
Yeah, it's very much you do a master's in whatever you want. It's sort of, I think, at least I grew up with the mentality that your undergraduate degree is something that everyone sort of does. It's usually a BCom or, where you get into sort of, you get a commerce side of things, or you just do a BSc, or you get into engineering. And then the master's is really what you do to get a job. It's not something that you come out of school saying, hey, I can do this undergraduate degree and then get a job. So it was similar for me, where I think this is just a base. That's how sort of even I approach it. And then if I get a job, well enough. But if I don't, then I have planned to do a master's eventually. And there is really no pathway in India for sports related anything. Journalism also not too much. It's always sort of at the back of our heads that we'll go overseas to do a journalism or something more specific in sports management or coaching or whatever it may be in terms of a sports degree. But yeah, when you come out of school, you're sort of driven towards engineering, or you're driven towards, medical studies. But so my college, again, Ashoka University, has come up recently in the past 5-6 years, and it's based off the Western education system. And I think that's why I was attracted to it, because you don't get in with a syllabus and a textbook and you do that for 3 years. You're able to mix and match your majors and minors, try courses, drop them. If you don't like it, take something up, go overseas for a semester abroad. There are a lot of options that way. So I think that's what sort of drew me to Ashoka. But, when you talk about a pathway into education, into sports education, I still think it's invisible. I don't really know of anything.
I find that so interesting as well, because it's so different to like kind of my experience, because growing up I literally googled like sport universities in like the UK and stuff, and Loughborough came up straight away for me, so I could like plan my kind of sports kind of career immediately. So I'm kind of taken back a bit that it's not kind of so easy for you and so kind of straightforward. I'd love to get you over to Loughborough, because I feel like you would love it, because it's just a full kind of thriving campus of sport, and it's just so busy. And we had one of my teammates in my first year actually was Aditi Chauhan, who's the Indian goalkeeper. So I was her roommate for when we went to like on away matches and stuff, which is crazy to think now. But
that's amazing, because I did interview her last August, I think about 3-4 months ago. And that was actually, so interestingly enough, that was my breakout sort of interview. It was the first time I did an Instagram live, and I was like, I don't know how this works. I'm hoping she'll come on time. I'm hoping we can hear each other. My Wi-Fi doesn't crash. And that was again an opportunity I got through a volunteer role. And she came on, and basically my entire football team, everyone in India sort of looks up to her, right? She's our national team's goalkeeper. My entire football team was freaking out, and I said, I'm going live with Aditi soon. And they're like, oh, we'll join, we'll comment, we'll say hi, we'll ask questions. I said, okay, cool. And then I was like totally like just sweating. And then she came on and we just chatted for 1 hour, and it was beautiful. And I remember it like so vividly. And that's just crazy that this connection just happened where you were her roommate on away trips. But yeah, so that's sort of the only exposure to Loughborough is through Aditi Chauhan, that I know that a university like that even exists, because we never sort of driven to it or even exposed to it that this is a possibility in the future. But yeah, it's really cool to see that sort of this coincidence has happened.
Yeah, because I was just thinking when you were talking about football and stuff, I wondered if you had interviewed Aditi, because what she's done since like Loughborough as well is incredible, setting up like She Kicks, still obviously playing. She's kind of turned her Instagram now into more of a kind of an athlete influencer kind of vibe, where she's using her like platform for good, but also for her own kind of commercial sponsorship, which is obviously so important for athletes, and perhaps something that we don't see enough of within the women's sports space, just supporting athletes to kind of have their careers but also have something else to fall back on. So that's something that I'm quite interested in with my research, like how athletes are using social media and how they manage it and deal with it. Have you got any kind of thoughts on that side of it as well when it comes to social media? How powerful do you think it is for athletes specifically?
I think, as with anything, social media also has its pros and cons. I think it's very, very important to harness the pros of it and use it, because even when it comes to, let's say, women's football, which I do follow very closely, Megan Rapinoe and there are other like star athletes that do talk about very important things, equal pay, racism, homophobia. There's a lot of things that go on beyond on the field activities. And I think it shows the athlete to be a person and not just be a person who plays and then, is not seen ever again. So I think when it comes to social media, even with Aditi Chauhan, we never really saw the Indian women's team at camp. Their games are never streamed on our TVs or, anything of that sort. So the fact that now she's showing us how she trains, she's showing us what she eats, she's showing us behind the scene clips from the India camp, it just exposes us to the entire sort of setup of the Indian women. And then, India's got sort of rights to host the Under-17 Women's World Cup and the AFC Women's Championship in 2022. So those are really big steps. And I think all of that is linked to higher viewership of the Indian athletes. And that is linked to the athletes being more visible. That comes with them sort of exposing themselves on social media. in moderate amounts, because I think India is also a very sort of nascent body when it comes to women athletes in general. We've had some Olympic success, but other than that, we don't really see our women on TV. It's like the sad truth, and that's something that we want to change. So I think social media plays a really, really big sort of role. And it blows my mind that even with SheTalksBall, I was reaching out to a few athletes, and I was in the middle of my class, and I was thinking it'd be so cool if I could talk to this woman from the Women's Super League in England. And I just sort of DM'd her agent, and she replied saying, "Yeah, cool, just send me an email." I was like, they're so accessible. That's crazy. And it's crazy because women who are playing at such a high level shouldn't be this accessible. They should be, they should have like much more sort of security when it comes to agents and all. But the fact is that they are so accessible because no one knows them enough. And I think it's all linked. So in a way, it was good that she was so accessible because I could then reach out and sort of hear her stories and things like that. But I want to also see a day where they are big superstars, just like the men are, because that's really when the corporates and the administration side of it gets involved much more heavily.
You briefly touched on racism, so I just wanted to get your opinion on what happened in Australia. Do you think that we should still be having these problems in 2021, or do you think that racism is a thing of the past and the fans just need to move with the times and stop this behaviour?
Yeah, I think there's just no space for this in 2021 or 2000 even. I mean, I think it's just, I can't fathom where it comes from. I just can't figure it out. And I get that people, I really wonder if it comes from some internal pain that people are facing, or they feel superior because of the color of their skin. It blows my mind. And I think there's absolutely no space for it. But at the same time, I think the way the Indian men who faced this racism responded, it's testament to how athletes have that sort of way of blocking out everything that they need to block out. And hopefully the people who were involved in an activity are caught and fined appropriately. But I think there's just absolutely no space for it. I think even with going over to the US, the football setup especially, it's very, very, and the WNBA setup, in fact, they are very, very vocal when it comes to things outside of their sport. And recently the WNBA sort of flipped the Georgia Senate with their activism. And the NWSL, which is the Women's Football League, actually, sort of took a knee during the national anthem every time they came out for a game. So, and the fact that we're talking about it right now shows that they are having an impact, and people across the globe are sort of covering it and realizing that they're doing something which is important to do. But I think that racism, homophobia, these things are just, the only explanation I can think of is that it comes from some deeper pain within the individual. And yeah, I hope that sort of that pain also just, goes away for that person. They shouldn't be suffering like that, but they should not be putting their pain on other people in that manner too.
Completely agree. Like, I know this is kind of like a bad way to look at it, but I just feel really sorry for those individuals sometimes, because I'm just like, it's just so sad that they have to see the world in that way. And it's just because they're missing out on such a huge part of kind of different people's cultures and just differences between people that makes kind of like human life so beautiful, I think. But I just want to bring it back slightly a bit more to cricket again. You mentioned there about obviously like athlete activism. What do you think about cricket when it comes to kind of like athlete activism, especially within like the women's game and the kind of the role of activism? And do you think there's enough of it going on to call out inequalities?
I think the activism stage of an athlete comes after you've sort of achieved a certain athlete stage, and that not just being a personal stage, but also a stage of recognition from everyone and coverage and things like that. And I think the women are just hitting that in terms of breaking records at World Cups, attendance figures, winning World Cups. I think World Cups are always a sore spot for Indian team fans. But I think as soon as you do that, you become sort of not just a player who plays a sport, but you become someone who I look up to now. And whatever you say and anything you talk about outside of cricket, it's going to become important, and it's going to enhance the game for the people who come after you. So I think, as you mentioned, open LGBT relationships now, I think that's big, that's massive, because it makes a person who's coming in so comfortable. And there are instances of people not even coming into sport because they fear of what's going to happen in the dressing room or in the locker room. And I think that entire fear being taken away when it comes to women in sports in general, I think across many sports, that's the reality, that it's very, very inclusive. And I think that now is sort of the time where we know a lot more about the Nat Sivers or the Meg Lannings and what they're doing, in a year of no cricket. What they've been up to means that they have viewership on them even outside of cricket. And that's the time where you harness it and say that, hey, I want to talk about this too, and I'm going to do that as well. I think Alyssa Healy, Megan Shure, I think they talk about quite a few different things. They're very vocal when it comes to issues around the world. And I think it's just going to grow from there. I think the Indian women specifically are still sort of, they're very young. So I think they're still hitting that athlete stage where we follow them outside of cricket. And as soon as you hit that, and as soon as they sort of believe that themselves too, that's when they're going to start that activism stage. And I think that's a really important sort of step up. And it's a crucial step up. I don't see it too much within the Indian setup yet, but I hope that the Indians seeing players from around the world doing it eventually sort of step up and take on that responsibility too.
It is a responsibility, I guess, but it's also kind of like not putting too much pressure on that athlete at the same time, I guess, because at the end of the day, they are professional players and their job is to kind of do the sport. So I think sometimes I'm a bit worried, but I do like have a bit of an idea of what they should be doing, and that's a bit unfair perhaps sometimes. But I've seen from your profile and stuff that you've travelled around watching the games in England as well. So can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, so I actually sort of landed a volunteer role or an internship with ICC during the Men's World Cup in 2019. So I flew over to England for 6 weeks and I sort of realized that the Women's Ashes was going on too, and there was no way I was going to miss that. So while I had a really sort of enriching experience working with the sort of digital sponsorship team at ICC for the World Cup, I also on the off day sort of went over to Canterbury or the sort of more, I took a train and, went outside of London to watch the Women's Ashes. I watched one game that was, I think, historic for Elise Perry, and it was just amazing to me to see it. And I think what stood out to me was the fact that the women come over to the boundary line after the game, they chat with the people, they, take photos, they sign anything you want them to sign. And I spoke to Danny Wyatt there. I told her that I had watched her at the Women's T20 Challenge over in India the year before. I'd gone for the final and I had seen her play too. So she was like, oh, that's really cool. And I think the fact that they're so approachable, I mean, it's just beautiful because a player that's so approachable, I think you grow the sport like 20-fold or 100-fold, because the entire line of kids there who I kind of chatted with too, they were blown away. And I think I was blown away too, being just 18 years old. I think that factor, that experience is something that I'll never forget, like let alone the children who are younger than me seeing that happen and taking pictures with them. So I think, it's a double-edged sword where as they grow, they'll become less approachable, but I want them to grow and I want them to sort of be on our TVs regularly too. So it was really nice to be able to catch them in a phase where they come over and, they chat with you. But I want to see the stadiums fill up the next time around if I go for a game, and not just like a boundary line with people with their sun hats and chairs chilling out. I think I want like tickets just to be sold out. But yeah, that experience was fantastic, and I'm keen to sort of go back. Maybe I'm planning something where I come to Birmingham in the Commonwealth Games, and it's easier to catch a lot of games in one location. But we'll see how that pans out. But yeah, I mean, that's an experience of a lifetime. I don't think I take any sort of women's match for granted.
I just wanted to quickly ask you, as you immerse yourself in the British culture when you came over, I wanted to get your opinions on what it's like watching cricket in England and what it's like watching cricket in India.
Ooh, that's a great question. I think I can compare watching the Women's T20 Challenge final over in Jaipur and then watching the Ashes game in Canterbury. I think, for one, the tickets were free in India because a lot of matches aren't sort of, people don't show up to stadium. So the fact that they had the stadium just open to anyone, it was packed. It was like overflowing. It's packed till the brim. Obviously, weather is very different. So it's like a sweaty atmosphere there. But at the same time, very loud, very noisy. Really, you see that cricket is just within the blood of the Indians. It can be kids playing cricket, but at the end of the day, it's cricket, and you're in a stadium, you have an atmosphere of like a professional game going on. I think that was fantastic. And I sort of experienced that about 4 months before I went over to England. And then I went over to England, very different in terms of, let's say, I traveled alone for 2 hours. I was just 18. So it was very safe. I think trains are on time. That's a big thing over there. There's not too much of punctuality in public transport here. But I went over, and obviously, like, I've heard things that people say that, be careful because there are some sort of rowdy comments that can be made in stadiums and things like that. But I had a wonderful experience, I think. And I do want to build my sort of understanding of things based on my experience. I mean, because that's really the atmosphere that I was in. And yeah, it was a fantastic experience. I think I sat next to this old gentleman who was really involved in the game, and we got to chatting about who's going to take the next wicket and things like that. So I think obviously the entire approach to the stadium was much more sort of serene and leisurely, and not like you're fighting to get up the stairs and find your seat, which is the case in India quite a few times. But I think both situations have their own charm, and I can't say I enjoyed one over the other, because I got to see like world-class athletes in both stadiums and a really great game of cricket. I'm just hoping that I can do that more often and sort of make it a habit and get more people involved into watching it too.
Something that's popped up in my research, so I've been looking back at the kind of World Cups of the past, and I think it was 1997, was that hosted in India? But there was crowds of like 20,000 at Eden Gardens. So when I'm reading with my research that there's been huge kind of crowds in the past, I kind of get a little bit confused why it's never been sustained. And the other thing as well is hearing kind of from former players, they've spoke about when they've gone to India, the crowds have always been amazing and everybody's been so respectful, and there's just one language in India and that's cricket. And to me, I'm like, this sounds amazing. But then at the same time, you've kind of hinted that there isn't the pathways and stuff. So what do you think has hindered the growth within India?
Yeah, I think I have to sort of bring this up where the federation does not sort of treat both sides equally, I would say. I mean, they do put in a lot of money to the women, but the women are often an afterthought. And, you see that where their fixtures are at Tuesday at noon, where everyone's at work or at school, and there's like no way anyone's going to reach a stadium in peak afternoon to watch a game, right? So I think just small things like that, where you can change fixtures to a Friday evening or a Saturday evening and just expose the game. I think now women's cricket is on TV, to be fair, so it's very accessible just by clicking a button. But filling up stadiums is an important thing, and it comes with planning well and planning in advance, which I think we still need to work on. Our tours still keep getting cancelled, and we don't have any visibility. Our women, I mean, it's their job to play cricket. They don't have any visibility on when they're going to be doing that next. So I think that's one like very important thing. Another important thing I would say is I was reading this report by one of like well-known Indian former cricketer, now sort of a content creator in the cricketing space. It's called An Equal Hue, and it talks about the Indian women's cricketing team. And it's very interesting to note that obviously a lot of our facilities are concentrated in the urban cities, but a lot of our players come out of rural backgrounds. And people are wondering why that happens. And I think it's because there is no pathway. So they don't see a need to go to a Delhi or to a Bombay to play, but it's just that fire in their belly that makes them the best, and then they manage to do it. So imagine if, I was interviewing Ananya from WomensCricZone, and she said something really interesting. She said, the women in India make it to the top despite the system, not because of it. So imagine when you provide the talent with the pathway, say, just do this and then climb here and climb here and climb here, what kind of talent we'll produce. And I think that's really sort of crucial to see. It's interesting to note that, our talent comes out of rural areas or not so developed cities, whereas all our facilities, our coaches, and the money invested into grassroots is within the, the Delhi, Mumbai setup. So it's just, again, it should not be despite the system. It should be because of the system. And the second we do that, we'll win that World Cup instead of sort of fading out in the final. And we'll make more semi-finals. It won't just be a one-time thing or a two-time thing. So
100%, because it's one of those that people keep saying it's a chicken and egg kind of conversation, isn't it? But without that funding and without the resources, we can never kind of progress. And there's so much kind of comparison to the men's game always. And it's always kind of like the men's game is perhaps used to, well, we're not as good as the men, so that's why we're not going to fund it. Or they don't get as many crowds in because the men get this amount of people, whereas the women don't. And that's just a lazy excuse, I think. So what do you think needs to be done, and what's your kind of hopes for the future when it comes to women's cricket, both in India and globally?
I think the key would be investing. And I think because that's not just a one-time thing. As soon as you invest, you have viewership that grows. And as soon as people see, a lot of people, there's a demand for this, you have sponsors come in, you have media coverage. And as soon as that happens, you then have more viewership. And then it sort of builds from there. The cycle gets bigger. It's like a snowball effect. I think as soon as that happens, when there's demand for cricket in India or for women's cricket in India, we get to host World Cups. The second we get to host World Cups, our stadiums will be full for sure. And, because a World Cup is planned in a much more structured manner. And so I think it's important to just start that cycle and not say that I've put in money, where are my returns? Because when we initially might have put in money for the men's side of things, we didn't get returns immediately. And a lot of people, compare men and women right now. You have to sort of compare the women's team to maybe the men's team 25 years ago or 30 years ago, when that much money was being put into them and not, the amount that's put in today, because you can't compare outputs if the inputs are different. I mean, that doesn't work like that. So I think everything comes from investing and showing intent, and just, we need the BCCI to put out statements. We just don't have too much of accountability right now. It's quite sad. And I think as soon as that starts and people get invested, there is a market for it. I mean, that's why we're having this conversation, because there is a market for women who want to, or people who want to hear about women's cricket, and people want to watch it too. We've seen that with attendance figures across the globe. So yeah, investment. There's no other answer.
Just quickly to round up, we just wanted to ask you a few fun questions. So who's been your favourite person to interview so far?
Sian Kelly, who is the coach of the Argentinian women's team. I had the pleasure of sort of chatting with her through the WomensCricZone platform, and it was fantastic. I mean, she is just 23 years old and she's coaching a national team. And I spoke to her about what it's like being so young and kind of having a team that's younger than you, but also older than you, and grouping them and, training them together. And I think she sort of told us about her setup in Argentina, what the culture is like. And I think it was supposed to be a 15-minute chat, but it ended up being a 30-minute chat. And although it's a little recent, so I remember it much better, but I think it's one of my favorite chats, because I got off that sort of broadcast and I immediately, so she spoke about a fundraiser, and I guess I can plug that in here too, where they have a fundraiser to raise money for their team. And if they raise $2,000 or pounds, I believe, they can sort of fund their team for the qualifiers coming up. And I immediately told my parents that I want to get on that link and donate right now. And I keep bringing my parents in because I'm dependent on them still for everything. But yeah, and she was just an inspiration to me. I think it was really awesome to see a woman so young in sport doing something so awesome. So she would have to be my favorite chat. I think Aditi Chauhan's a close second, but yeah, Sian Kelly for now.
Obviously, the Indian cricket team, both the men's and the women's teams, have been successful in their own right. Who's been your favourite cricketer to watch? Because I think for me personally, you can't go wrong without saying Sachin Tendulkar and Rahul Dravid, which I was very lucky to see them in 2011 in Hove.
That's interesting. So I sort of skipped the Tendulkar frenzy era, and I've sort of grown up on the Kohli frenzy era. So I would have to say Virat Kohli. I think he's just, apart from his name and fame and everything, he's earned that. And I think it's fantastic to see him. But from the women's setup, it's been about 3-4 years that I've closely followed them now. It's going to be really hard to pick. I think Poonam Yadav, I think she's a sort of leg spinner for India, and sort of always not too much in the limelight because she's not the captain, or she's not the opening order batter, or the one with the biggest social media profile. But I think in terms of cricket and her ability to just switch a game and flip it on its head, I'd have to sort of say Poonam Yadav, just for her performances and how sort of I feel safe when I see her in our lineup. I feel like, okay, I can just take a breath and sit down, and this match will be fun to watch. But, obviously all the other women are fantastic.
I'm going to quickly steal a question before Alex says one in a second as well, because I was so privileged and so lucky to go to the T20 World Cup back in February last year. Yeah. And unfortunately, I wasn't at that Australia-India match. But hearing about it and getting all the updates through, it was crazy, because I think everybody kind of just assumed Australia would win because they're so dominant. And that was a major upset. And it was so early on as well. And like you said, Yadav was unbelievable. Was it 4 hits or something?
Yeah, it was something just completely crazy like that. And just the game ended within 20 minutes. I was like, what's happening? And the game was over. It was quite awesome.
What did you think of that kind of tournament as well? Because obviously India had an unbelievable kind of group stage, and then they got to the final and then kind of didn't turn up. So it was a little bit disappointing. But what do you think? And also, oh my God, I've completely forgotten her name, 16-year-old batter, Shefali Verma. What a machine. You must be so excited for the future of cricket in India.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. And going back to the T20 World Cup, we had a golden run, and somewhere at the back of my mind, I was thinking that, is it too good to be true? Because we came with such a young squad, our veterans had just sort of retired from the T20 format, and we came in with new leadership, with new young talent and Shefali Verma and, the others coming around. And that first game really set the standard. I think we cruised through the group stage, and I have to, as an Indian fan, apologize to you if you're an English fan, because the semi-final was disappointing. I think as a cricket fan, it was disappointing. I really hope that there would be a reserve day or something, a little more better planned structure, but unfortunately it wasn't. And maybe that sort of kicked into the momentum was completely halted for India. And going into that final, we were outclassed from the first power play. I'm still reeling from that Alyssa Healy knock. I think it'll take me another year to get over it. But I think that it's a good experience for our young lineup. And I think it's important that from that momentum, we develop our domestic leagues better and we get them playing consistently and not just a month-long tournament somewhere along the way, because that's when we'll sort of flourish in the coming World Cups. And it won't just be a same story where we fly and then we just sort of dip at the end. So that World Cup was fantastic. I think the young talent coming, as you mentioned, Shefali Verma, that talent, she was suddenly exposed to so much of like headlines and so much spotlight that, it's not easy. It takes a toll on a person. And she didn't show up at the World Cup final, and we sort of remember her for that, not for everything else she did before that. So I think it's important to sort of also cut some slack because she's very new to this entire thing, and it's easy to ride on the highs and then completely trash a player when they mess up one game. But credit to Australia, I think they played fantastic cricket as usual, and what a celebration after that with Katy Perry and the whole setup. I think that was fantastic. Yeah, all in all, a fantastic World Cup for women's cricket in general, and I think India can take a lot from it too.
Where do you see and hope women's cricket is going to go in the next 2 to 5 years?
That's a great question. I mean, the ultimate hope is that it reaches that level of stardom or fame as the men's game does, where when I tell you cricket, you ask me which one, men's or women's. It's not men's cricket. It's not cricket and women's cricket. It's just cricket in general. And you have to sort of, I hope that default is broken, like, as soon as possible. And that will again come with that whole cycle of putting money in, getting more viewers. But that would be just fantastic where, I'm waiting for the day where someone asks me like, oh, with football, someone asks me what club do you support? And I'll say Chelsea. And they'll be like, oh, have you heard about this player? And I'm like, no, I don't know the men's team. I started the women's team, but you have to like explicitly mention that. And I'm hoping that sort of default or that bias is broken instantly. And, apart from that, the future of women's cricket has to be better scheduled games, no cancelled tours, people fighting to buy tickets. I think that's really the epitome of a good sort of sporting tournament.
Have you got any other questions, Alex, or should we wrap up?
No, I'm just going to say, though, that's epic, though, that you support Chelsea, because I know a lot of people in India, they tend to support Man United because that's just what is shown over there. Like, my cousin's a Man United fan, and I was like, you've just brought utter disgrace on the family because I was joking, of course, but he took it all in good jest because he's not much younger than you. He's 18, so it's all fun and games. Just quickly, where can our listeners find you on social media if they want to get in contact or if they want to follow your progress?
So my personal handle is at Radha Gupta. That's RADHALATHGUPTA on Twitter and on Instagram. And my sort of personal project is at SheTalksBall on Twitter and Instagram as well, and YouTube, where I sort of put up snippets occasionally of women I chat to. But yeah, that's where you can find me, and I'll be happy to sort of get in contact. I've recently discovered that Twitter and Instagram are like great places to meet people, as like I met Hannah there too, a few. But yeah, I'm always sort of happy to chat with people who are interested in sort of learning about it.
Perfect. Well, that kind of brings us to a natural kind of close now. Like, we've spoken about so much, which I kept messaging Alex like, I've got goosebumps. Honestly, like everything you're saying is so what I'm passionate about and so kind of similar and stuff. And it's just amazing to hear somebody who's so many thousand miles away having the same kind of ambitions that we have and vice versa and everything. So honestly, I need to like calm down because I'm getting so kind of like, it's amazing to actually kind of meet you and stuff, because that's the power of social media now, because we connected over Twitter. I've met so many amazing people over Twitter. It's mad, isn't it? Like, you can meet people, you can get them on a Zoom like this, you can record a podcast, you can share the message far and wide now, which...
Yeah, if I can just quickly, I think I have to say this, that content creation is so easy in today's age, and it's such a valuable tool to further anything, like whatever you're talking about, you just record something, you talk about it, you create conversation on it, and instantly it grows. So I think it's so easy to do something like that in today's age, and we're also connected across the globe now. I think there's just no excuse to sort of, pick up the phone and chat with someone and enhance your topic or your cause in whatever way you can.
Well, that's why I thought I'd reach out, and that's why I wanted to get you on so early, because your kind of message is amazing. And like you say, like literally just content is power. Content can change perceptions, it can start conversations. There's so much amazing work that can be done just by purely doing an interview, recording a podcast, sharing some photos. I think that's what I've realised within the domestic game in England for the players, is they don't have content creators capturing their training moments. So it's kind of left to them / team managers to try and capture everything, which is obviously really difficult if there's no dedicated role. So the more that we start seeing more people getting involved with that kind of side of the media and getting more photos, doing more stuff like this, the better it will be.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's really sweet of you. And that's really the hope, the fact that you can sit at home and do something like this. Imagine when everything's, fine, hopefully soon enough. And we can get together as a unit of women in sports and just boost this entire thing, like pick it off the ground and make a vertical sort of change. That'll be fantastic. And I think there is capability, there is demand for it at the top. So we know that we can sort of shoot it up there. And there's power. I think content is power, as you said. So it's just been great chatting with both of you. And yeah, hopefully, I get to listen to a lot more of your podcasts very soon, because they're quite cool.
Oh, thank you. I say we're so new to this as well. Like, we're still learning, we're still developing. So any tips that you've got, please send them our way, because it's a learning process, isn't it, Alex?
Definitely. And you never know, we might get you back on at some point as well.
Oh, that'll be fantastic. Completely up for it. Yeah, I think I love chatting about the women's game. I think I do it too much. Yeah, I need to kind of control. But yeah, I think it's fantastic, and there's a lot of exposure as soon as you get new faces talking about a certain thing. And yeah, I'm excited to see where this sort of takes off very soon.
Well, thank you so much for getting involved, and we'll let you escape so you can enjoy the rest of your day and everything.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Massive thank you to Radha for being a guest on the podcast. It's amazing what she's achieved so far at just 20 years old. And to all our listeners, if you want to keep up to date with everything we're doing, you can follow us on Twitter at WCricetChat and on Instagram at WomensCricZone. And if you want to give us a like on Facebook, we are WomensCricZone. And if you wanted to give our personal Twitters a follow, Hannah is at HannahT1194 and I'm at Alex Jane Pereira. This has been Women's Cricket Chat. Tune in next time.